To introduce our speaker in a moment, I'll invite club member Mark Davis with the classification Financial Advising and Wealth Management to introduce Austin Allison. But Mark, you should know about Mark. His father was a Rotarian in the University District Club. And Mark is a leader in whatever setting he engages. And his daughter just completed her 1-year anniversary at Pacaso, the firm about which we will learn more shortly. So Mark probably has some secret admiration for that place that's helping his daughter get off to a great start. During the program, we'll ask our Zoom participants to enter your questions for our speaker using the Zoom chat feature. Our club sergeant at arms, Ken Grant, with classification marketing, will moderate the Q&A portion of the program. Now to introduce our featured speaker is Mark Davis.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. Great to be back on the most important podium in Seattle. And my wife and I, Louisa, are very thrilled to have Alicia join the team at Pacaso a year ago. And it's an amazing company, and they certainly have an amazing culture. Austin Allison is co-founder and CEO of Pacaso, a service that helps people buy and own second homes, and has broken records and changed the second home real estate industry through passion, innovation, and technology. Austin launched Pacaso in October of 2020, and by March of 21, he had successfully raised $90 million over the course of 2 rounds of funding, and became the fastest growing company to reach unicorn status, which is a $1 billion valuation, in less than 6 months. Now, over a year later, the company is valued at $1.5 billion with total funding of $217 million. To help make the dream of second ownership possible for people, Austin created an entirely new category of second home ownership through co-ownership. Austin will be sharing his entrepreneurial journey from real estate start in Ohio to the launch and eventual sale of his startup, dotloop, to the incredible growth Pacaso has seen over the last year. Podium's all yours, Austin.
All righty. Thank you, Mark. And hello, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. And Mark, before I start, I should just say thank you for allowing Alicia to be part of our team. She's amazing, and we're really fortunate to have the opportunity to work with her. So I'm Austin Allison. I'm co-founder and CEO of Pacaso. And I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area now in Napa Valley. But Seattle has a special place in my heart because I spent about 4 years at Zillow Group, which was the company that acquired my last business. And so it's really great to be reconnected with a bunch of fantastic Seattle people. So let me just start with a little bit of context around the origins of Pacaso. So, you know, I mentioned that I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. We lived paycheck to paycheck. We certainly never had a second home. I didn't even know of any friends that had second homes. It was this sort of distant dream that felt like something, you know, I would work towards my entire life and maybe never achieve. And along the way, I had an opportunity to start selling real estate. When I turned 18, I sold real estate all through college and used that as my way of paying for college, and then went to law school after undergrad and ended up starting a company which digitized real estate transactions, and we sold to Zillow in 2015. And that journey afforded me with the luxury eventually of being able to buy a second home. So my wife, Angela, and I, and our little Yorkshire Terrier at the time, bought this house that you're looking at on the left of the screen. Although when we bought it, it was a complete rehab. There were bears living in the house when we took ownership. And we renovated it and turned it into a beautiful second home. And this second home just absolutely enriched our lives. We became part of that community. We met new friends. We developed rituals and built memories that are now very important to who we are as a family. And having gone through that experience, I recognize that, you know, many people dream about living in a more enriched life, and many people dream about owning a primary or secondary home, but it turns out it's out of reach for most people. And one of the main reasons why it's out of reach is because second homes are expensive and underutilized. The average second home is only utilized about 5 or 6 weeks per year. But there's no way to really sort of right size your ownership of a second home. The only option of the past was to buy a whole second home and leave it sit vacant for 10 to 11 months per year. So that's really what inspired the idea behind Pacaso. You know, I wanted to find a way to make this dream of second home ownership accessible to more people. And we wanted to create a new form of ownership, a new category that really had never existed before at scale. We wanted it to be smart, because it's not very smart fiscally or socially to buy a really expensive asset that consumes a lot of energy that sits vacant for 10 or 11 months per year. So we wanted to find a smarter way. The other thing we care a lot about is the environment. And I know Rotary cares a lot about sustainability and doing good for the world. You know, empty homes are bad for the world. Every home that's sitting empty consumes energy and causes more homes to need to be built to absorb demand. When you can better utilize these assets, it's better for the environment and reduces the carbon footprint collectively. And then the final point that I cared a lot about was community. You know, I recognize that when we bought that second home at Lake Tahoe, we didn't just buy a second home, we bought a second community. And community is really important, whether you live in Seattle or Napa Valley or Cincinnati. You know, community means a lot. And one of the things that's very tough for some of these second home communities is the empty homes, because empty homes mean businesses struggle for much of the year. You know, the local bars, the local restaurants, the local, you know, coffee shops. So by occupying homes, it actually creates more opportunity for communities. It also brings more life into the community by having more long-term homeowners that are committed to the community long-term. So all of that led to our mission, which is very simple. It's to enrich people's lives by making second home ownership possible and enjoyable for more people. And the way that we do this is, as Mark mentioned in the intro, is through this new category that we created called co-ownership, which basically means you and a small group of people can co-own a home together. The easiest way to get your mind around it is, imagine if you and 3 or 4 of your friends or family members decided to co-own a home in Palm Springs or Bend or Sun Valley. You could go do this on your own. You know, you could form an LLC and buy the property and sort of divvy up all the responsibilities around bill pay and maintenance and repairs. Or you can use Pacaso, where we handle all of those details and you don't have to know the other people. You can literally just go to our website at pacaso.com and find beautiful homes all over the world where you can buy an eighth or a quarter and enjoy the home as if you own 100% of it while you're there, but deal with none of the headaches and much less expense. And the way that we make money as a business is we charge a markup of about 12% in the real estate price. So if, let's say it's a $2 million home, we would take that $2 million home, we would mark it up by 12%, and then we divide by 8 and sell it as these individual increments of 1/8. So that's a little bit about how it works and how our business model functions. To illustrate some examples of the types of properties, this is a property in Palm Springs, and we have, I'll talk about our markets here in a moment, but we're in about 30 destinations around the world, but not around the world, but throughout the US and now Europe. And we're doubling that in 2022. So the number of destinations is growing quickly, but Palm Springs is an example of a really great market. This is a home that would otherwise cost you about $3.5 million to own all of. But with Pacaso, you could buy it for $500,000 per unit. Here's another example, also in Palm Springs, of about a $2 million home that you can buy for $285,000 per unit. And I should also note that we have integrated financing. So our service includes everything from designing these homes to providing, you know, all the management and bill pay services, to a scheduling app that enables everybody to share the calendar in a fair and equitable way. But one of the other things that we do is financing. So if you buy a $285,000 unit, which again is a $2 million home, you could buy this home for under $100,000 down, because we offer 70% financing at very competitive rates with same day approval. So you could see it's a very accessible and financially responsible way to own real estate. And I know another market that's pretty popular in Seattle is Bend, Oregon, and Sun Valley, which are two markets that are coming soon. In terms of the owners that we serve, the group is quite diverse. I mean, from the age range to the backgrounds to the locations where the primary residences live, it turns out that a lot of people aspire to own second homes. In fact, many people who already own second homes will cite their biggest frustration about their second home is that they don't use it enough. And when they don't use it enough, they feel, some guilt and some obligation and anxiety around trying to use it more often. So this really attracts a broad audience of people who want to own a second home, but not waste all that money and deal with all the headaches. And I would say that the common theme, though, amongst this very diverse group of owners is memory making with loved ones. Second homes provide a really special place for people to spend time with their family and their closest friends and build memories that are lasting and sort of endure the test of time. And what the second home enables when you own it and you're part of the community and the neighbors and you're friends with the local restaurant owners and all the other things that happen, when you own a home in a community, those things aren't really possible when you're staying at a hotel or renting somebody else's home. So owning a second home is a really life enriching thing. And it turns out that the life enrichment value is just as good whether you own an eighth or a quarter when compared to owning the whole thing. In terms of where we're at currently, I alluded to this earlier. We're in about 30 destinations now around the US. You can see that we started about a year and a half ago. We launched the company in October of 2020, myself and a number of other former Zillow teammates, including Spencer Raskoff, who was the CEO and co-founder of Zillow for a long time. We all launched Pacaso about a year and a half ago. We started on the West Coast and we've been working our way east. And we recently expanded to Europe as well. So if you've ever dreamed of owning a place in Spain or London or Paris or Tuscany, that option is now a lot more realistic and accessible than it once was before. And all the hassle and headache associated with home ownership, second home ownership in and of itself is a lot of hassle and headache because second homes tend to be located in expensive and difficult areas to manage, but it's that much more complex when you buy internationally. So we eliminate that burden as well and make it really easy for you to own, whether you're buying in Palm Springs or Paris, France. So that's a little bit about where we're at as a company. What I'd like to do before I wrap and open it up for Q&A is just spend a couple minutes on what's happening in the real estate market, because we spend a lot of time in the real estate market and in second home markets in particular. And to set that up, I'll talk about distributed work. And for those of you who don't know Mark's daughter, this is Alicia right here under me on the screen. So we're a fully distributed company, meaning we have no offices. We have about 200 people on our team now. We're spread across more than 30 states and 6 countries at this moment in time, and we all work remote. And this remote work, and we plan to stay that way indefinitely. We never plan to have a headquarters location. I mention this because this is representative, this type of company and this type of work is representative of where a big portion of the world is headed. And this is one of the byproducts of the pandemic. The pandemic has empowered a lot more families with the freedom to work remote, either part-time or full-time. And that's empowering people with the ability to actually use a second home more than what would have otherwise been feasible in an environment where you have to be in the office 5 days per week. So what that's driving is it's driving a lot of new demand in different types of markets. So historically, second home markets, places like, Palm Springs or Sun Valley or, Aspen or Napa Valley, these have been markets where transaction volumes were lower. where the average days on market that would be required to sell a home was longer, because it wasn't that feasible for somebody to live in a second home destination in a world where you have to be in the office every day of the week. That has all changed, permanently. More people are now moving to these locations and buying second homes in these destinations, and there's not enough supply to absorb all the new demand. So what we've seen radical home price appreciation in certain markets around the country. And it's pretty much true of almost all of our markets. So of the 30 destinations that I mentioned, whether you're in Washington, California, Oregon, Florida, doesn't matter. If it's a second home destination where people desire to live, chances are there's a lot more demand than supply, and home prices have appreciated at a really radical rate over the course of the last 18 months or so. In some of these markets, we've seen more than 100% year-over-year growth since the bottom in 2020. And while things are starting to cool off a little bit as interest rates and prediction of interest rates inching up starts to come into play, things are cooling off, but we're still way above where we were pre-pandemic, and growth is still up and to the right. So, we believe that the shift that has happened in real estate is a permanent step change in valuations, meaning, if a price was, $1 million in a market like Palm Springs pre-pandemic, and now the price of that home is $2 million, while there may be some correction or cooling off that happens, we don't think it's going to be, a correction all the way back to where it was. We think that there's a new step change and a new floor that was created in these markets. And we believe that over the long term, demand is going to outpace supply in these second home destinations and continue to cause, home prices to go up and affordability to be a challenge. So that leads me to the second prediction is around affordability. Housing affordability is a challenge, has been, for a long time in many of these markets. And it's only getting worse because there's really only, when you have a dynamic where there's more demand than supply, meaning more people interested in owning homes than homes available for sale, that drives up home prices. And the only way to absorb all that demand is to build new homes or to make better use of existing supply. And for a whole bunch of reasons, ranging from labor shortage to, material costs to zoning rules, it's basically impossible for us to build our way out of the supply shortage to keep up with demand, which means that we have to find better ways to utilize existing supply. Otherwise, affordability is going to continue to be a challenge, and it's going to make it very difficult for locals to afford a primary home in these markets. And there's really three themes that, I'm most excited about personally as it relates to the sustainability revolution and the things that are happening in real estate to try to address these housing problems. One is accessory dwelling units, which is often referred to as ADUs. This is basically a small building that you can put in your front yard and rent it out. So it's a way to take empty yards and create new supply that people can live in. So ADUs have really been gaining traction over the course of the last decade or so, and fortunately are really starting to take off in a meaningful way. Another theme that we're really excited about is sustainable construction, specifically prefab and modular types of construction, because it's through the traditional construction methods, it's basically impossible, at least from where we're sitting, to catch up with the demand curves. And there's a lot of really interesting sustainable solutions that are at play. The final piece is co-ownership, and this is most relevant in second home destinations because second homes are so underutilized. It's kind of like, what carpooling does to traffic. If you have a traffic problem in a city, it's a lot better to have 8 people carpooling in a big SUV than to have 8 empty SUVs driving down the highway. And every second home that's sitting empty is like an empty SUV driving down the highway. So co-ownership is really an integral part of the sustainable revolution as it relates to housing. And we're really excited and humbled by the opportunity to play a small role in the future of real estate. So with that, I'd love to open it up for any questions. And should you all have, other questions about Pacaso or want to learn about our product or some of our markets, you can visit us at this page. We actually created a dedicated link with a special offer. You can sign up there and we'll set you up in one of our homes if you're interested for a couple nights to check it out. And we'd love to talk more. But with that, let's open it up for Q&A.
Austin, thank you so much. Awesome presentation. Interesting. I am curious right off the bat, what's the difference between what you just told us and a timeshare?
That's a great question. Probably it's the second question that we get.
Dang it, I wanted to be the first question. What's the first question?
So the timeshare answer is pretty simple. It's kind of like comparing an asset to a liability. With Pacaso, you own a second home. You and a small group of people own real estate. Our company retains no ownership in the home. So you and the 4 or 5, 6 people that own the home own 100% of it. Whereas with a timeshare, you're effectively prepaying for the right to use a hotel, which leads me to the second difference, the type of property. These are residential single-family homes that are unique and limited in supply. That home that I showed you in Palm Springs, there's only one of those. And at any given point in time, there will only be 1 or 2 units of that available for sale. With a timeshare project, if you convert a 300-room hotel to a timeshare and divide each room into 52 units, because that's how timeshares are sold by the week, you have 15,000 of the exact same units on one property. So there's so much supply and it's not unique, it's commoditized. And that's why it's near impossible to resell your timeshare. Whereas with Pacaso, because it's real property ownership, you just own real estate. So when you resell your Pacaso unit, on average, our units have resold for about 15% above what they paid a year prior in 10 days or less. Whereas with timeshares, they're hard to sell at all. And if you are lucky enough to sell one, you're going to typically lose about 50% of your initial investment.
Okay, I dig it. I like the answer. So that brings me to the second big question, which maybe is your first big question. How does one get out? How does one sell their eighth? What does that look like? Walk us through that.
Yeah, it's super easy. It works just like selling a whole home, except for it's much faster and easier. So basically, let's say that you bought that Pacaso that I showed for $285,000. A year later, you decide that you want to be in Sun Valley instead of Palm Springs. You call Pacaso and say you want to sell, and you've got 2 options. One option is you can pick your price and we'll help you sell it on the open market. And when we sell it on the open market, we sell it on our website, which has millions of people visiting it. We also syndicate it through all the real estate agents. So it goes on Redfin, it goes on Zillow, it goes on the local real estate agent websites, and also through the MLS, and we'll bring you a buyer. The other option though, and this is what happens more often than not, is if you're interested in trading into another Pacaso, we'll just facilitate that transfer. So we'll basically think of it like taking your Palm Springs unit in on trade, and we'll move you into that Sun Valley Pacaso. So it's very easy and quick. The only one difference in the selling a Pacaso when compared to selling a whole home is the other owners in the co-ownership group have a right of first refusal to buy your share. So if you bought that $285,000 unit, you decide to sell it for $325 a year later, the other owners have a first right to buy it for $325.
So that leads me to another question, obviously, which is that means you can buy more than an eighth of a house if you wish to?
Yes, you can buy up to 50%.
Okay.
More than 50%, we recommend that you buy the whole thing.
Okay. The first version that you just said, though, does that, when you push it out to a real estate agent, does that mean there's a 3% commission in there like usual real estate?
Yeah, but we absorb that in our fees.
Okay. A question from the audience, curious how you choose your next markets.
It's demand driven, meaning we have, the millions of people that I mentioned that come to our website, they tell us what they're interested in. We listen to our customers and we think of it like, crowdsourcing. If we have 1,000 people that are telling us we need to be in Sun Valley versus 100 people that are telling us we need to be in Lake Chelan, we're more inclined to go to Sun Valley because there's more demand for that particular market. But over the course of the next couple of years, our intention is to be in pretty much every market that somebody would be interested in as it relates to second home ownership.
Okay. Let me throw something at you. I was in, and it's interesting that you said you live in Napa, and please forgive me for asking this question, but I'm going to connect two dots. When I was in Napa, there were signs on the streets that said, no to, I see that you're nodding your head, you know what I'm going to say, no to Pacaso. What's that all about? And if you don't want to talk about it, I get it, but I saw them and now I meet you and I said, anyway, go ahead.
No, I'd love to talk about it. It's a great question. So anytime, you know, in my experience, I've been part of a handful of companies and my co-founder's been part of, you know, many more. And in every single instance, if you're doing something that seems new or different, there will be questions and misunderstanding and resistance. And this is no exception to that rule. So like, take electric cars as an example. When electric cars first came to market, lots of people, including the dealerships, resisted Tesla and the electric car movement. Now, as society has acknowledged and adopted electric cars as the way of the future and a smart and sustainable way to commute, now states actually mandate, you know, certain emission requirements. So we're just in the very early stages, and there's misunderstandings and you know, when we first enter a market from time to time. But what that means for us is we have to work harder to educate people on the facts about how co-ownership really works. I mean, co-ownership is good for everyone. I mean, it's good for the community. It's good for housing affordability because we're consolidating demand into fewer homes. And it's, you know, it's just good for society and good for the world because we're better utilizing an underutilized asset. But it does take time to be fully understood.
Yeah. Okay. Good answer. I mean, we saw the same thing with, you know, Airbnb. We say the same thing with all sorts of stuff, right? A quick question about when you have a transaction overseas, is it more complicated?
If you're a normal buyer, you know, not using Pacaso, absolutely. I mean, to go buy a property overseas is very complicated and risky. You know, as an example, like a lot of the homes in Spain aren't legal. They were either built or modified without proper permits and design. And if you don't know what you're doing, it's quite conceivable that you could buy an illegal home. One of the benefits of using Pacaso is that we handle all those details. We have local market experts and employees in all these markets to make the transaction process easy. So it's just as easy with Pacaso to buy a home in Spain as it is Palm Springs.
Okay. All right. We've got time for a couple more questions. So do you work it out with the other co-owners directly on when you can use the home? I know you mentioned before there was an app. Is that how you answer that question, is through the app?
Yeah, that's part of how we answer it. So this is the number one question that we always get, which is like, what happens if everybody wants to use the home at the same time? The short answer is that we've designed a really innovative technology called Smart Stay that distributes the calendar fairly and equitably amongst the ownership group. So if you own 1/8 of the home, you're going to get 1/8 of the peak season, 1/8 of the non-peak, 1/8 of the holidays. No one person is able to dominate the calendar. And we've designed it in such a way that it provides this very dynamic and flexible, you know, interface that's a rolling calendar. Like you basically can just open up the app and pick the dates that you're interested in. And if it's available and within your allotment, it'll allow you to book it. The other thing to note is that it turns out that not all people use homes at the same time. And the more diverse the ownership group, the better utilization you'll see in the calendar. Meaning, take a mountain market like Sun Valley, where you've got a strong winter and a strong summer. Some people prefer the summer over the winter and vice versa. So the more diversity you get in the ownership, the less inherent conflicts you have right out of the gate. But Pacaso manages all that. It works very well. Our homes are occupied on average 90% by the owners, and our net promoter score, which is a way that we measure customer satisfaction, is in the, you know, fraction of the top 1% of you know, best in class. So owners are very satisfied and they get a lot of use out of their homes.
Yeah. All right. Austin, thank you for bringing this to us. I'm going to have you click off that slide if you don't mind, and we will move on to the program. Listen, if you've got a couple of extra minutes, they were slow in coming, but there's a lot of extra questions that I did not get to, unfortunately, today, and there's some really good ones in there. If you want to take those on, if you've got the time, that would be brilliant. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention today and for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I'll address them in the chat. Thank you all so much. Take care.
All right. And you'll like this. On behalf of a local group called Harvest Against Hunger, which is part of our District 5030, they have, in your name, donated 600 meals to local families. So thank you for being that, and you are welcome. All right. Quick on with the program. Quick shout out to our two big gold sponsors right now. That'd be Liz Powell with Remax on Market and Bob Alexander. Thank you for all that you do with their contributions to our club. We are able to watch and share conversations like Austin's today on our YouTube, which is just fantastic. All right.